I got my hot hands on Skelegod from the new Masters of the Universe Revelation Netflix series, so let's check out this raging storm of horror and terror. Hey everyone, welcome back to Toy Habits, and today we are taking a detailed look at the Masterverse Skelegod figure from the Masters of the Universe Revelation cartoon, so let's dive right in. Alright, let's start with looking at the front of the box, and the front of the box is actually really basic. It just looks pretty black and it bleeds up to a bluish and purplish color, and if you see some of the details up close in the box, it just looks like cracked stone, which is not super interesting. And of course there is that Netflix logo like the Transformers War for Cybertron series, if you're familiar with that. And on one side of the box you can see the name again, and he is designated as the Cosmic Lord of Destruction. And again, not a super interesting way to portray this particular figure on a side of a box, but on the other side we do get a caricature of Skelegod and his wielding his green goo with his fists, and you can also see some of his energy coming out of his neck, and you can also see this really cool cosmic background. And I was actually really surprised to see that they had also represented the same exact photo on the back of the box as well. I think they could have done something very different, and you get a more of a scene going on in space. Looks like there's an asteroid field here, but again, not a great presentation actually, but I do love the way that the character is drawn. It kind of gives you a hint as to how he might look in the animated series, which is great. One thing that I do like is the upcoming figures that are also in the line. I always love to see those as a kid and as an adult, as I love to see what's coming down the line that I could possibly find at my local store, if I can actually find these at my local store. I think I got lucky with this one. Another aspect that I love on the back of this box is the introduction of this bio and little backstory, because we really know nothing about the character since the cartoon has not been released yet. Alright, let's first take a look at the head sculpt, and I actually really like the way that Skeletor's head is drawn and the way that his facial features are represented in the skull here. I do like the cheekbone detail here and some of the lines that he has on his face, although I do wish that he was given red eyes like some of the Skeletor figures that I've seen in the past. But the centerpiece of Skelegod's head sculpt is really his Havoc Staff infused helmet, and I really love the sculpting detail that they gave on this helmet, and I really love the ram horns, the way they curve around and they have horizontal and vertical lines running through them. Now, the way that his helmet was sculpted really made me think of the Masters of the Universe 2000X version of Skeletor and his Havoc Staff. So let me bring in Skeletor's Havoc Staff from the Motu 2000X line, and you can kind of see the representation that they were trying to go for. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not, but I think it looks great. And another part of the helmet that they've layered in was this horseshoe-shaped piece right here, which gives the helmet a little bit more pop and definition. And turning this around, we can get a look at the back of the helmet, which is pretty much just a straight black piece, and you can kind of see those horseshoe horns protruding from the back here. And one of the things that we haven't talked about is this green energy that's emanating from his neck. And I love coming up with stories on how this might have come to pass, because I have no clue how this character is going to be represented in the cartoon, but it's fun to speculate. I think Skeletor has consumed his Havoc Staff and possibly consumed the power swords, and it's just given him this unlimited power and unlimited energy, which is represented in his green energy that's emanating from his neck. Now, you can get a much better look at this energy from the back, unfortunately, because that's where most of the energy comes from. It fills up the back of his neck and goes up to almost his helmet. And I love that it's translucent, and I wish that they actually made his neck of the same material, because if you can see it right here, it's more of a straight green than a translucent green. He has a solid green neck covered in a translucent green energy, but I really applaud the effort here, and I think it makes the figure look a lot more interesting. Now, Skelegod comes with a very substantial piece of shoulder armor that also houses his cape. So let's take a closer look at this. And his shoulder armor is just made of a really flexy material that it looks like it's removable. And I'll see if I can remove it just so you can see what it's like to have Skelegod without his armor. But the way that this is designed are just one huge piece, and it looks like it's a skull that's looking at you, and it kind of goes in the motif of his entire outfit, where you have his crotch piece that looks like it's staring at you, and also his knee pads, which we'll get into in a little bit. And here's a look at the back of Skelegod's shoulder armor, and I can almost hear the Mattel design team saying, maybe we should paint this green and gray like the other parts, but I'm actually glad that they left this part black. He does come with a soft goods cape, which I'm super excited about. It has these silver and gray jewels that are adorned on the back, and they're actually on both sides, which was a surprise to me. But it's actually really cool, because when you introduce different textures to the figures, it just makes them have more displayability and just more depth and dimension, which I'm all for. And something that I noticed when I was playing around with the back of this figure is that the cape is actually not integrated into the shoulder armor. It's a separate piece that comes off, and it looks like it's attached here, and it looks like these are magnets that attach to the back here. So what you do is you just place that in, and you just put the armor over, and his cape stays in place. All right, I had to put this guy on a stand because he is very difficult to pose and to keep standing. So he is going to be relegated to a stand for the remainder of this review. And I'll get to my gripes about this figure in a little bit. But for now, let's look at his arms. Now, his arms are really covered up by a lot of this armor. And it's made from this squishy material that you'll find on his shoulder armor. And I feel that all of this armor really covers up some of the detail and muscles that we all know and love from the classic Masters of the Universe figures. So with all this armor, you really don't see a lot of the arms, and I think that's a problem. But one of the real problems that having all of this armor introduces is, how do you articulate the figure and grab a hold of it? So his armor moves around, which is removable. His hands also twist around. So you really got to have a firm grasp on this figure to articulate it. So having some of this armor really impedes some of the articulation that they've put in this figure. So a lot of design choices went into this, and I'm not super thrilled with some of them, as you can see here. And not knowing any backstory on the figure, you can see that the chest has this purple and green He-Man-esque H in the middle of it, and I do like the way that his abs were colored and sculpted, and generally the color of the Skelegod figure. I do like the dark blue and the black, as they complement each other very well. And this is not one of my gratuitous crotch shots, but I really want to talk about this crotch because it keeps staring at me. When I saw concepts of this figure, it was a head scratcher to me. Why would they even put a face where his crotch piece is? So definitely not a fan of the design choices here, and you can see the face detail represented in the leg armor. And unlike the forearm armor, these pieces are actually built into the foot, so it makes articulating this foot a lot easier. And one of the last things that I want to show you is that Skelegod's armor and his forearm armor are removable, as well as his cape, so you can kind of get more of a closer look at the sculpt that he has for his shoulder armor. Again, it's pretty substantial, and it is a flexible piece. So I think that's a cool design that I like on these figures. I don't like hard plastic pieces, and his forearm armor that has those really weird eyes staring at you also are squishy pieces too. And his cape, like I said earlier, is soft goods, and we can really take a closer look at that. There are jewels on each side of these tassels here, and I think his cape is really well done. I love the use of lavender and that deep purple. It gives him a very regal feel. And here is a look at these. I don't know if they're magnets, but I just think they're probably fasteners, because I don't think there is anything that is magnetic in here, and I think these just clip on the back like so, just to keep his cape on. And I wanted to bring in Skeletor from the Masters of the Universe Classics line and the Skeletor from the Masters of the Universe Origins line, just so you can see the scale difference. Now, these Masters of the Universe Revelations figures are massive. And let's do a back-to-back comparison. Hopefully Skelegod will stay up. But as you can see, he is a good inch above Skeletor from the Masters of the Universe Classics line, and he kind of towers over the Masters of the Universe Origins Skeletor, as you can see here. And while I do have all of these figures here, I do want to point out one thing I mentioned about Skelegod's eyes. So I wish that the eyes were red like you see in the Origins line. You can kind of see them in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, but I think it's a little bit too dark for that in this light box. But I wish they had put in some red eyes in Skelegod's eyes, because I think that would just make him pop a little more, or in fact, maybe use this translucent green and kind of have that green coming out of his eyes. I think that would look pretty cool. Now I am going to zoom out a little bit just to show you some of my gripes with this figure, and some of the Mattel figures in general suffer from loose ankle joints, which I think when you make a figure this bulky, it has a hard time standing up, and this figure is no exception. You have to manipulate this figure in a very particular way to get it to stand, because it's got armor and it's got a lot of chunky pieces which make it either want to fall forwards or backwards. I do want to show you just some of the struggles that you might have just getting this figure to stand. So he's very top heavy, and with the ankle joints the way they are, that they're very loose, you end up with a Skelegod that falls down quite a bit. So you do have to manipulate the ankles quite a bit. And, you know, I didn't get that right because he's going to fall backwards. So, yeah, there's just a lot of manipulation that you have to do with these figures. I also do think that the scale of the head is a little bit small for the figures. And I noticed this when I saw the pre-release images, and we covered this in one of our episodes, but I do think that they could have made Skeletor's head a lot bigger and a lot more substantial, given his huge representation here with his huge armor and his huge presence. All right, let's take a look at Skelegod's accessories, and we'll first take a look at his green energy that is supposed to fit on his fists. And you can see here it's very hollow, and it can actually fit both of his fist design. And this kind of reminds me of the energy from the Thunder Punch He-Man from the Masters of the Universe Classics figure. So I think that's a cool accessory. It really goes along with his energy that you can see emanating from his neck. He also comes with some additional hands if you want to change up the posing, and they are just the closed fist versions of his open hands that he comes packed with. And finally, let's take a look at the Master Sword. Now, the Master Sword, in my opinion, I think is probably the least interesting of all these accessories, and I'm actually not very impressed with this particular version of the Master Sword. If this is indeed the Master Sword, who knows? I think it is, but only time will tell when the cartoon is released. But I think the blade is too thin, and it just looks very, very small compared to the massive figures that come in this line. I do like the way that the hilt is designed. I do like the brown wrapping, and I do like the color differentiation here that they have on the hilt with a darker gray versus the silver that they have on the blade. And here is how his energy slips over his hand. There is a hole there, and you can just place this over his wrist and it slides in pretty easily for a very cool visual effect. And what you'll need to do if you want to get him to hold his Master Sword is that you need to replace his hands, because he is never going to grab a hold of the Master Sword like this. And if you're not into symmetry, you can replace his open fist with a closed fist on his left hand so he can grab the Master Sword, and I've left his open hand out so you can just kind of see what it looks like with his open hand and his closed fist. I think it looks pretty cool holding the Master Sword, but I do wish that the sword was a lot more substantial for this figure and for the line in general. And here is Skelegod all geared up with him holding the Master Sword and that huge green energy ball coming out of his right hand. And he actually looks kind of cool with all of his accessories put on, and he looks like a formidable foe that He-Man has to deal with in the Masters of the Revelation cartoon, so I can't wait to see that. All right, I'm coming out behind the light box for this one to give you our honest hot take. So, honest opinion, I really tried to like this figure, and I was so excited to find it on the shelf yesterday, but to be honest, love the concept. It's a cool design, but I did not love the execution. And as I got to playing with it, I fell out of love with it. There are just too many design flaws with the large armor hindering the posability of this figure. You try to raise the hands, the armor comes up, and it just creates a really weird look for the figure. And I love the soft goods cape, but actually I just set this on my desk and now there's schmutz on it. I hate schmutz. But anyways, also, the loose ankle joints really turn me off from liking this figure, and so this makes me very skeptical that I will be collecting any of the Masterverse figures in the future. But as always, we want to know your opinion, so please use the comments section below to sound off, and if you have this figure, we would love to know what you think about it. On Toy Habits, you will always get an honest hot take, and if you've enjoyed this review, hit the thumbs up, and thanks for tuning in to Toy Habits.